There are three elements that go into making a great picture: good composition, proper exposure, and sometimes post-processing. The most fundamental one is composition, which is how you position objects and your background in your field of view. It's the most fundamental one because that's the first thing you do when you take a picture. You set the composition. By understanding how to properly compose an image, you can immediately improve the quality, look, and interest of your picture regardless of what camera equipment you have. And anyone can do it with a little practice and creativity. So whether you're using a cell phone or a fancy DSLR, if you nail your composition, your images will stand out among your family members and friends. Every picture should have a focal point or something of interest, and photographers use different elements of composition to direct the viewer's eyes towards that focal point. The first compositional element I'm sure you have heard of before. It's called rule of thirds, and that's where we take our field of view and we divide it into three sections, both vertically and horizontally. In rule of thirds, we use these lines and intersection points as guidelines to position our objects. Traditionally, when we take a picture, we put our subject right down the middle. But with rule of thirds, we can get a little bit more creative than that. If you are shooting a person or a single object, try throwing them off to one side of the frame. This especially works really well if a person is looking off into the distance, because it gives them some space within the frame to look out. Whereas if you had them in the center of the frame and they were looking off in this direction, it may feel a little cramped and it doesn't give them much space to look. If you are taking a portrait in landscape orientation, try placing one of their eyes on one of the top intersection points of the grid. Doing this will move your subject to one side of the frame, and this follows the rule of thirds. On the other hand, if you are taking a portrait in portrait orientation, try aligning their eyes with the top horizontal line of the grid. This will give your subject some headroom in the picture. Now let's talk about landscapes. If you are shooting a landscape, you will want to align the horizon of the landscape with one of the two horizontal lines on the grid. To decide which horizontal line you're going to use, you first have to decide if the sky or if the land is more important to you. If the sky is more important to you, align the horizon with the bottom horizontal line. Doing this will give you more sky in your image. But if the land is more important to you, then align the horizon with the top horizontal line of the grid, and this will give you more land and less sky in your image. The next compositional element I want to talk about are leading lines. These lines are created by natural objects that draw the viewer's eyes to the focal point of the image. These lines can be roads, streets, shorelines, a wall, anything you can think of that has like a straight edge. The trick when using leading lines is you will want to compose your image where you have your subject and you have your line converging to your subject. The next compositional element is framing. Again, we will use natural objects, but this time we will frame it around our subject, and this will tell the viewer exactly where to look. Some natural frames include door frames and windows. To frame your model, you can have her stand in the door frame or sit on the window ledge. Or you can get really creative and use plants and other things to frame around your subject. Another thing you can experiment with are angles. If you shoot your subject from a high angle, it will give your subject a sense of vulnerability. And if you shoot your subject from a low angle, it will give your subject a sense of power and strength. You can also take your camera and give it a slight twist, and this is called a Dutch angle. It's a different picture style, but it also gives your picture kind of a cool feel to it. The last major compositional element I want to touch on is symmetry. Anything that is symmetrical has a mirror image. Many things in our world are symmetrical, such as a group of dancers, buildings, a carousel, a river, or a hot air balloon. So if you see something symmetrical, it's just screaming at you, "Take me symmetrically." Eventually, when you get comfortable with these different compositional elements, you can combine a few of these into one picture to make one powerful picture. The best way to learn how to take great photos with great composition is to start with the camera you have. Whether it's a cell phone, a point and shoot, or a DSLR. Just leave everything in automatic and don't worry about if the exposure is a little bit off or if your pictures are a little bit noisy. Right now we're just building the foundation, and later on you can learn about how to take pictures with the proper exposure. And the second best way to learn is to practice, make mistakes, and learn from your mistakes. For example, a good baseball player doesn't become good at hitting a baseball just by watching videos. He practices, he makes mistakes, and he adjusts for his mistakes. And that's how he becomes a good hitter. And that's a similar mentality you need to pick up when learning composition. Go out there with your camera, practice, make mistakes, Take your pictures back to your computer, see what works, see what didn't, and then correct for those mistakes in your next photo shoot. If you enjoyed this video, I would appreciate it if you gave this video a thumbs up. And if you want to see my next photo tutorial, click on that red subscribe button right down below and you'll be notified when I post that video. In the next episode, I will be talking about the mentality you should have as a photographer.